It's been about, I was working out, it's been about 3 or 4 weeks since I've been at Burwood. We had big camp, and then our family headed to Perth so Sophie could do a 5K fun run. And then last week I had COVID, so it's nice to be back with you in person, sharing, worshipping, seeing, fellowshipping. So we did go to Perth, and we went there for the World Transplant Games. If this is your first time to Burwood, or you're watching online and going, why did I go to the World Transplant Games? It's because I had a transplant. There's a pretty low bar for entry. You don't actually have to qualify, except you have to have a transplant. And so we went over there and gathered first of all with Team Australia. And there were about 150 athletes as part of Team Australia, but if you include their families, donor families and supporters, there's probably about 300 and 350 people gathered there. And it was a really unique experience because everybody was there and they all had something in common. And if it weren't for that one thing, we wouldn't have been in the same room. Not too dissimilar to what's happening right now. We're all here for one reason, because we follow Jesus. And if we didn't follow Jesus, the chance of all of us gathering in this room would probably be pretty slim. So it was amazing to be in this place. All these people had also had transplants. And someone said, so how does it go? Do you walk up and say, hey, so what did you have? Yes, pretty much. That's how it goes. So you're chatting with someone and you meet them and say, yeah, so what did you have? They're like, oh, I had a heart. Oh, how long ago? Oh, about 2 years. Yeah, how's it going? Good. Then we talk. So the ages were from like 5 to 80. But we could all talk meds. So we'd talk about, hey, what's your level? What are you on? Yeah. Oh, okay. Is that working well? Yeah. Any side effects? No, they're pretty good. But my doctor changed it to this and that worked really well. I was like, oh, okay, I might mention that to them next time. So we're having this conversation. And you could do this with anybody who was there. It was really cool. But there were guys who'd had heart transplants, lung transplants, kidneys. A few people were on their second or third kidney transplant. One of the guys I met, he had a liver transplant, and he had his liver transplant about 20 years ago. So I said, hey, how's it going now? And he's like, yeah, they've been doing some testing and a few things that we don't like the look of. So we'll see what happens when we get home. So you've got people who have just been transplanted, like me, and people who are their oldest competitor was 82. He had a transplant, about 45 years before that. And it was still going really well. But then you had other people who were in the process of rejection, but they were still there, they were still competing. The World Transplant Games Federation, which runs these every 2 years somewhere around the world, they basically look after all this. They did all the planning, all the organizing, get all the athletes from the different countries into the same place. And so you can see, if you looked at this group of people, you'd think, hey, they look pretty much normal. And yeah, they were. They had a transplant. They had an organ that wasn't working. So this is the opening ceremony. You could tell the Aussies in the crowd, as we walked through, because we got into Optus Stadium, and someone goes, we didn't bring a footy. We should have brought a footy. This is like the only time we're ever going to get to kick a goal at Optus Stadium. Then someone said, oh, yeah, that or a cricket bat and a ball. But it was really fascinating. And as I got to meet these people and spoke to them, their stories from the transplant perspective were all similar but different. But then you also ask, so why are you here at the Games? What are you hoping to achieve? And pretty much everyone I spoke to said, look, a medal would be awesome, but here I just really want to make sure that I finish. I'm here just to prove to myself that because this happened, I can still push through, I can still persevere, I can still go as hard as I can, and I just want to prove that I can actually finish this. And so you can see all the different sports. There was everything. There was darts, there was 10-pin bowling, there was golf, there was tennis, swimming, athletics. And look, some of these guys are really good athletes. The fastest time we saw for the 100 meters was 11.2 seconds. So that's not slow. That's really quick. And so watching these people do their thing was really inspiring and really incredible to see. But for most of them, it wasn't about winning or coming first. For most of them, it was about, I'm just here to finish. I'm not worried about where I come. I just want to make sure that I do my best and I finish whatever it is that I go into. And that was really cool to see, really cool to listen to. And especially in the athletics, we went and watched it one day. And you've got your hardcore athletes who are just like flying through. But then you've got those people who just want to be in it. They're just there to participate, to give it their best shot. And so everyone else has crossed the finish line, and there's one person who's still only halfway through the race. But they are still running, they are still moving forward, they are still heading towards that finish line, and they're the ones that get the biggest cheer because everyone else knows what that's like. Like, yes, you're in this and you just want to finish, and so we're going to cheer you on until you get to that finish line because that's what this is actually about. This isn't about winning, this isn't about coming first. This is actually just about doing your best and finishing what you start. So I competed in tennis and they had a race for the 5-year-olds. It was so cool. There was 2 of them, so they're guaranteed a medal. But they did it from the 50-meter mark, and one of the guys got to like a meter from the end, and he was like, "Okay, I'm done." Like, no, you got to cross the line. You got to keep going. So he like takes a step and finishes. It was just a really fascinating experience and one that I'm incredibly privileged to be a part of. I played in the tennis and was fortunate to have a good time and get a few wins. Walked away with some bronze medals, which is pretty cool. So someone said, "So do you just wear them around your neck, like when you go to the shops and stuff and bust them out?" No, I don't. You're like the first people who've seen them. So, but it helped me really kind of recalibrate and think about, why do you start something? Generally, if you're starting something, you're starting because you have this goal of actually finishing it. You don't generally start a renovation with the plans of going, look, we might finish it, but I just want to at least get halfway. It might end up happening that that's what happens when you do your renovations, but the actual goal is you start so that you can finish. And if you think about most things, this is how you approach it. When you're doing a 21K, a half marathon, Dan, your goal is to finish. You might have a time you're aiming for, but you don't go, look, I just want to get to the 17K mark and then that'll be good. You actually want to finish. Whether it's a hike, a craft, study, renovations in the home, renovating a car, the goal is actually to finish what you start to do. And some of you are thinking, yep, look, you get a piece of cake. The goal is, I want to finish this. I'm going to persist until I get to the end, and we're going to get this done. That's fitting because we're talking about a series called The Royals. I'm not going to reference the coronation. I'm sorry. I figured, how can I fit this in? But I just can't. So I just did. So we do have the coronation coming up this evening, and a new king is going to be crowned. Today we're not talking about that king. We're talking about a different king. We're talking about King Asa. Now, if you haven't heard of King Asa before, that's quite okay. He's probably not the most well-understood, well-read character in the Old Testament in the Bible. But he's this king where we get a lot of lessons from him on how to finish and how to finish well. As followers of Jesus, as disciples of Jesus, we want to be disciples not just for a month, a year, 5 years. Isn't the aim to follow Jesus for your life? It's a lifelong commitment. When BJ gets baptized, we've been talking about this and what it means to follow Jesus. And it means that you're committing your life to him. And so the rest of your life, you want to follow him to the best of your ability. And you want to finish well. You want to finish strong. So we're going to explore the story of Asa. If you've got your Bibles, I hope you do, open up to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 14. We're going to be going through this. I'm going to give you a brief rundown of Asa's life. So, much like tonight, Asa gets crowned king. His father was Abijah. He was king for about 3 years. His grandfather was a guy called Rehoboam. He was king for a little bit longer than that. Rehoboam's father was Solomon. So there's this pretty solid pedigree. He comes from the line of the kings of Judah. And Asa is crowned king. And once he's crowned king, in 2 Chronicles chapter 14, we read this. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Now that's not something that you read often when you're reading about the kings of Israel and Judah. There were not many who actually did what was right. You look, the 20 years before Asa became king, the nation of Judah was deep into idolatry, deep into worshipping the gods of the nations around them, not very deep into following God for themselves. And so Asa becomes king. Guys, can you just move the slides on? My clicker is not clicking. Awesome. Asa becomes king, and he does what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And then we go on, and it says, he removed the foreign altars and the high places. He smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles. So he's come in, he's like, hey, we are getting rid of all this stuff that God told us not to do. And then it goes on, he says, he commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and to obey his laws and commands. So he is doing this, and he is encouraging the nation to follow God. And things are going really well. And then he has an encounter with a foreign nation, Zerah the Cushite. So we think Cush is probably around Ethiopia, but this guy comes up, he takes his army up to the borders of Judah and actually begins this battle against Judah. So we read it in verse 9 of chapter 14. Zerah the Cushite marched out against them with an army of thousands upon thousands and 300 chariots, and came as far as Mareshah. Asa went out to meet him, and they took up battle positions in the valley of Zephathah near Mareshah. So Zerah, with his huge army, we don't know if that means literally 1 million or just lots of people, we can't count them, but his army comes up. Asa with his army comes to meet them, and he kind of like, what's going to happen next? Like, who's going to win this battle? How's it going to play out? What's Asa going to do? And the first thing Asa does when the battle lines are drawn, it says, he called to the Lord his God and said, Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this vast army. Lord, you are our God. Do not let mere mortals prevail against you. So he sees this army against him, and he goes, God, you're stronger, you're bigger, protect us, be with us. And he goes to God first. And what happens? The Lord struck down the Cushites before Asa and Judah. We don't know what that means, whether it means he helped them win or he just destroyed them, not sure. And there's things to go into there, we're not going to today. But he goes to God first. And as he goes to God, God responds, God delivers. And you're like, yes, finally Judah has this good king. He's this king who's following God. He's being faithful. He's doing things right. This is how you learn how to finish strong. And so they win. They beat them. They chase them away. They take their sheep and goats and camel, and they return to Jerusalem. And he gets back to Jerusalem, and God sends this prophet to come and talk to him. And the prophet says in chapter 15, "The Lord is with you and you're with him. If you seek him, he'll be found by you. But if you forsake him, he'll forsake you." And he ends up by saying, "Be strong, do not give up, for your work will be rewarded." And so he gets this real cool encouragement from God. And so Asa hears that and he's like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing what's right. And so he goes on this really cool plane of doing what's right. And he continues to get rid of idols, remove the stuff that's distracting them from God, take away all the things that they shouldn't be doing. And he builds up the towns and fortifies the cities. And you're like, yeah, this is going good. He even, so his grandma. Now, I don't know what your grandma's like. But usually when grandmas speak, it's like the law. It's like you do that. You do that thing. Depending what culture you come from is the level of authority the grandma has. His grandma built an idol, an Asherah pole. And Asa actually says, no, sorry, grandma, that's not happening. You can no longer be the queen mother. You're off the throne. I don't know about you, but that's pretty big call. That's game. That's bold. But he does this because he wants to follow God. He wants to do what's right. And so he does that. And at the end of chapter 15, it says, there was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. 35 years. Things are pretty good. He's following God. He's doing what's right. He's getting rid of idols. He's getting rid of the pagan influence. And then in the 36th year of his reign, Baasha, king of Israel, comes to fight. Asa sees Baasha coming, and instead of asking for God's help, he takes the money out of the temple. He gives it to their combined enemy up to the north and says, look, if I give you this money, can you go and attack them in the north? So instead of coming down here to us, they're going to go up to you and protect themselves and we'll be safe. And the king of Aram says, yep, sure, let's do that. And it works. The Baasha, who was coming down to the south to attack Judah, hears that the king of Aram, Ben-Hadad, is up in the north, going to attack his top border. So he takes all his forces away from Judah and takes them up to the north, and problem solved. They go away. Asa goes back to Jerusalem, and God sends another prophet. And this time the prophet says, because you relied on the king of Aram and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped your hands. You're going to have trouble from now on because you didn't come to me. You did your own thing. And at that, Asa changes. He gets angry. The prophet he puts in prison. He didn't like what he said, so he puts him in prison, tries to shut him up. He brutally oppresses some of the people, and he ends up getting a disease in his feet. We don't know what that was. Though the disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the doctors. Then in the 41st year of his reign, Asa died and rested with his ancestors. What happened? Like, he started off really strong. He was doing all this stuff that was right, that was good, and then he fell away. He lost track of what was happening. And so it raises this question, how can we finish well? As followers of Jesus, how can you How can you run this race in such a way so that at the end you get the prize? There's a few things I think we get from Asa's story. I want to share them with you. And the first thing is this. Remember that God is for you. God is not against you. God is not there trying to make your life difficult or try to put hurdles in the way or constantly trying to test you or tempt you. He doesn't do that. God is actually for you. He's on your side. He wants you to run this race, and he actually wants you to finish it too, and finish it well. I love what he says to what we get out of this story. The Lord is with you and you're with him. Be strong. Do not give up, for your work will be rewarded. God's saying, hey, what you're doing, you're following me, keep doing it. I actually want to see you succeed. A lot of people can have this view that, yeah, God's good, but kind of just a kind of a big general good. He's not actually looking for good for me. He doesn't want me to succeed. He doesn't want me to finish this race and run it well. And if you go out and talk to your colleagues, your friends, your family, who have either this view of God or a view that God is not interested at all, it sends this message that I've got to run this on my own. This is all me, that I've got to fight all this stuff on my own. I don't have help. But the reality is God is for you. God wants you to succeed in this walk with him. He wants you to finish well. One of the guys that was at the transplant games, he had a few transplants, but he was also blind. But that didn't stop him. It was really cool. He was part of the opening ceremony, and they helped walk him up on the stage. And he was standing there next to the mic like this. Can I talk now? Is now when I talk? Do you want me to talk now? Like, yeah, just a second. It was really cool. And then he did part of the athlete's oath. And he did it well. And then later on, he was in the athletics. And how he does athletics, how do you run if you're blind? He had a runner with him and a little cord attaching them. And this guy was pretty fit. And so his runner would basically run slightly next to him and he could feel the pull of the rope. So that was how he kind of stayed in his lane and kept going. But it was really cool because kind of watching it, they're able to talk as they go and encourage each other. And he had this constant companion running next to him, encouraging him as he went and saying, hey, we got this. Come on, you can get there. You can do this. And that's how I picture your walk with God. He's right there next to you and he's running with you. And he's saying, hey, I'm here. You've got this. I'm right beside you. I'm for you. I'm here to help you, to support you, to walk with you. We can do this. We can finish, and we can finish strong. God also said to Asa, the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. And it makes me think of what Jesus did for us. When you think about Jesus' life and what he came to do, the way Paul puts it is Jesus came down to recognize our sin, to walk with us, to show us, to save us. And Paul says, if God is for us, who can be against us? He didn't spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. And he goes on to say, Jesus, who died, more than that was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and right now is interceding for us. God is for you. He wants you to succeed. The other thing we learn from Asa is to build habits, and build habits now. I love that when they were in peace, what did he do? He built up their cities. He fortified things. He got them in a shape where whatever may come, they were going to be ready for that. And you and I don't know what the future holds. We don't know what's coming next. But the habits that you build now into your daily life may be the very thing that you rely on when hard times come down the track. I remember I read this book about persecution, and one of the stories in that book was this guy who was a follower of Jesus, and he read his Bible or what he could get of it, and he memorized as much as he could of it, because he knew that being a Christian in a communist country was hard, and there's a good chance he's going to be arrested someday. And that day came, and he was in jail for about 17 years. But what he did was every time he found a scrap of paper somewhere in the jail, he would take it back to his cell and he would write on it as much scripture as he could. And he would stick it on a pole that was in his cell. And sometimes the guards would come and rip it all down, and so he'd just start again. And every scrap of paper he found, he would write the passages of scripture that he could remember, and he put them on this pole. And this is what reminded him and kept him going and kept him strong as he was going through this persecution and this time in prison. And the habits that we build now are the things that will very much probably keep us going in the hard times. As you develop a pattern of reading your Bible, of praying constantly and talking with God, when things come that you don't expect and things get tough, you can finish strong because you already have those things built into your life, and you can then continue and hold on to them during those times that things aren't easy. So what habits are you building? What things are you doing to connect you with God on a regular daily basis right now? The third thing is to do hard things. Asa had to go against 20 years of idolatry to be able to actually try and make a change in Judah. And he did tough stuff, including telling his family that what they were doing wasn't right. He did hard things. He removed altars, he cut down Asherah poles. He did all these hard things because he wanted to obey, and he wanted to obey fully. And so he realized that if you want to do obedience properly, it's going to require you to do things that probably aren't comfortable. And I think that's such a good point for us as we walk our lives today. There are so many distractions to your walk with God. There are so many things that are tempting you, trying to pull you off track, trying to pull you away. And I think Asa's story encourages us to consider, what are we willing to do to remove those things? Are you willing to do the hard things that need to be done in order to protect your walk with God? Does that mean if your smartphone is a distraction, if your smartphone gives you easy access to things that you shouldn't be accessing, does that mean you need to consider getting a dumb phone? They exist. If your computer is doing the same thing, does that mean you need to look at ways that you can get accountability? If some of the things that you're doing during your week are pulling you away from God, and you know it, but you're not willing to confront it yet, do you need to do a hard thing? Confront it. Talk to somebody about it. Be willing to remove whatever it is from your life that's pulling you or distracting you from your walk with God. And the last one's this: surround yourself with reminders. One of the things Asa did was he called an assembly. He pulled all the people together and he said, hey guys, we're going to do this together. Together, we're going to follow God. We are going to obey him. We're going to make this covenant. And they even went so far as to say, chapter 15, verse 12, it says, they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, with all their heart and soul. All who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, would have been put to death. So we've got a new plan here at Burwood that no, we don't. And there's no evidence they carried this out. But it does suggest that they were serious about following God. That they didn't want to do this half-heartedly. That they didn't want to do this just, 30, 40%, 50, 60%, 70, 80%. They wanted to be all in, fully committed to obeying God, following him, seeking him continually. And so they were willing to do whatever it took. after Asa had his battle with Baasha, the king of Israel, the prophet comes and he actually says, we're not the Cushites, the guys they beat previously, that God beat for them. We're not the Cushites and the Libyans, a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen. Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hands. We forget really easily what God's done. And that's why community matters. That's why gathering together matters. That's why our Burwood groups matter. Because when you gather with other people, they are there to remind you of what God has done. And when you forget, or when you feel like you are losing your way a bit, they can be there to say, hey, do you remember what God's done? Do you remember when you made that decision to follow Jesus? Do you remember what that was like and why you made that decision? The value of community and of Christian community is that they are there to remind you of the decisions you've made, of the commitments you've made, but also to remind you of what God has done in the past. I love this quote. We have nothing to fear of the future, nothing to fear of the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and his teaching in our past history. So are you taking time to remember? Like if we want to finish strong, if we want to stay faithful followers of Jesus, we need to take some time to continually remind ourselves of who God is, of what he has done in our lives. And that happens individually, but it also happens as community. One of the Burwood groups we have running at the moment is a disciple-making community. And in that group, one of the things that we do regularly is each week we get together and we talk about the conversations that we've been able to have with other people in our lives who don't yet know Jesus. And each week as we talk about them, we get to celebrate where God has worked. Even if it's just one tiny little conversation that we had that opened the door a little bit more, we celebrate that and we talk about how God has been good. And then next week when we get together, we say, hey, how'd it go this week? And that simple question allows us to remember what God has done and not to forget that he is at work, that he is active, that he is powerful, that he is capable, and that he's doing something. So I think these are the things we learn from Asa's life. I guess the question is, how is your race going? How is your walk with God? Perhaps it's just beginning and you are on fire and you're like, yes, this is good. I know what he's called me to do. I'm following him and I'm being obedient. I'm removing distractions. I'm doing hard things. Or maybe as you hear that, you're thinking, I remember when I was like that. But I'm not quite like that anymore. Or maybe you hear that and you think, yeah, I want to get back to that. I want to be that follower who is fully committed, who is on board, who is obeying, who is walking, who is celebrating, who knows God is with them, but also who is happy to be reminded that God is there. I'm not sure where you're at, but I want to encourage you that if God is prompting you to say, hey, this is for you, this is time for you to buckle up. It's time for you to get back in the race, get off the sidelines, not be lukewarm anymore, but ask God to help you to fire up, to be a follower who wants to finish well, to be a disciple who doesn't get distracted, who is focused, who is engaged, who is connected, and who is enjoying the journey of running along with Jesus right beside you, knowing that one day the race is going to finish, and when it does, he's going to say, hey, well done. I've got a crown for you. It's way better than a bronze medal. It's a crown that I want to give you, and I'm going to give it to you on that day because you finished, and you finished well.